we've got a very special treat because this is one of my favorite paintings that Karen has up on the screen there. She's going to be teaching us mixed media painting techniques. And just in case you're not familiar with Karen, which I'm pretty sure you probably are at this point, we've had her conduct quite a few webinars for us, but she's actually been a traditional painter since she was a very young girl. And when she discovered Painter, I think it's been about, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Karen, about 16 years ago, somewhere around there.
Yep.
I think she fell in love and she found that she could really transfer her traditional skills into this digital world. And I love that she believes that everyone can paint, draw, sketch. And her teaching methods are so easy to understand. If you have never attended one of her classes at Digital Art Academy, I highly recommend doing so. And she is also the founder of Digital Art Academy. So please check out all the classes there. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Karen to wow you right now.
Hi, and thank you, Tanya, for having me today. And again, please feel free to submit questions as I'm painting and talking. And hello to all you painters out there. Today I want to take you up in the clouds and discover how I paint clouds of all kinds using Corel Painter in a digital mixed media way. From a summer day to a storm rolling in. I also wanted to share with you a brush set which contains some of my favorite brushes for clouds, which I will make available to you sometime after the webinar on KarenBonakerArt.com, my blog site. But first, I want to share with you a few paintings where the emphasis is on clouds and some examples of what I would interpret as digital mixed media in Painter. And I guess what I mean by that in this particular image here called I Love Munich. This is what I would interpret or call a digital mixed media piece, collage, and it is not only a lot of hand painting with some of pen and ink, but also a lot of layering with different textures, and then going back into those overlays and using pen and ink and chalk and watercolor and on and on. So this is the exciting part about Painter that allows you, especially when you come from a traditional background, to enjoy those methods that you are so familiar with. Let's take a look at another piece here. If I can get this to advance. This is a simple pen and ink with watercolor using what some of the wetting techniques that are used on the watercolor layer, and I'm going to actually talk a little bit about that shortly. And let's take a look at another one here. This is a series of paintings that I have been doing in chalks, pastels, and more opaques. So I'm actually combining the three mediums to create this series of images from the Tuscany area. And the emphasis again is on clouds and creating those cloud formations using some of my favorite brushes.
Karen,
this one, yes.
Those clouds look so real. I just had to comment.
Yeah.
They're beautiful.
And that, I'll go back to that real quickly, but this brush is a brush that some of you already have called the Impressionist Cloud Brush. It's very highly customizable when you open the ABC controls or the advanced brush controls. I like to just call it ABC, which is an easy way of explaining it, and working with the well settings in particular. So lots of fun, lots of different ways that you can interpret this brush and change the makeup of it as you're working. And that brush is part of that set that I'll be giving everybody. This one is a combination of the buttery oils brush that was a series category that Skip Allen created, and some custom brushes of mine as well. So you can see that the difference here is, you know, a very thick paint, a very opaque looking image compared to those softer watercolor looks. So the very thick, and watercolor being a little more transparent in that respect. This is totally in a different direction, but again shows that versatility with Painter in being able to create these wonderful textural images using stampings and you know, different selections and channels to create these great images here. And this is what I call a block print. This was also done in a series, and I actually have quite a few in this series that I created, and I was looking to create that look of traditional block print. This again is another very atmospheric piece that I was working on. I love working with low horizon lines, especially when you're going to be putting the emphasis on clouds. Oftentimes, if there's too much landscape going on below, it's going to take away from that focal area that you're trying to really bring the viewer into. So this is more of a stormy sky, definitely, and again working with those series of brushes, brush categories that I'll be showing you here real quickly. This again is on the other range. This was done completely with one brush called the buttery, in the buttery oils brush category as well. And you know, you can see again that even with one brush in Painter, we're able to create that that beautiful look of traditional oil acrylic look. I do think I did add a little bit of chalk into this one here and there, just for a little added texture. This is one of my favorite paintings of all time, I think. I keep going back to it, but it's done with the Sargent brush, the default Sargent, but with some customizations to the brush, and it's one of my favorite go-to brushes. And again, this brush is capable of creating that very, very thick look of opaque, you know, giving us more of that oil or acrylic look as well. This one again was done with the brush category Schmidt Luscious Bristle is this brush, and again just one brush, and again you can see that power of working with a single brush and being able to get everything laid in pretty much by just working with some of the basic brush controls and well settings of that particular brush. This again started out as a thick opaque and ended up as a watercolor, and I'm going to show you how I achieved that look here in just a few seconds. Again, this is another look of that particular, you know, a little another segment of that image, same thing, but again with those thicker paints. This added, I think I added a little bit of pastel into this here and there, and one of the things that I absolutely love doing in landscape paintings in particular is to add a little bit of what I call sparkle or diamonds to a painting, and they're called, I like to refer to them as diamond lights or lights of diamonds that pretty much act as a way of moving you around the painting, from up here to the stars in the heavens, down to the little reflections in the pond below. And I think they just give, they can take a basic boring landscape and make it something a little, adding a little bit of magic to it and giving it a little extra something that gives you some interest and keeps you engaged in that painting. So I try to incorporate that into my landscapes as well. I also will go into portraits every once in a while, and again, this one started off very opaque and ended up in that watercolor look, and again, we'll get to that. Another opaque, this one has a little bit of chalk, but mostly these thicker oil and acrylic brushes. This one actually started off with a textural background where we actually paint directly on top of the texture. And this is one of my favorite paintings called Just an Ordinary Day. And this one again started on top of a texture, and I actually developed the painting via a reference and then added some of my own attributes to it as far as color and some of the dialogue that I wanted to portray. One of my favorites. This one was my Christmas card this last Christmas, and again, it's just a simple watercolor painted on top of a texture. So you can see by now that I do enjoy painting on top of established textures, because I think that there's just a lot of interest, a lot of fun that you can have with these simple little paintings that can be taken to that next level. And finally, this is just another example of, creating those beautiful atmospheric skies over a Tuscan landscape, and just adding those, we come to think of Tuscany in the spring especially with those beautiful poppies and flowers growing in the fields. So again, an atmospheric piece, and let's go on to Painter now and get into it. Painter, again, allows me to choose all those media choices that I enjoy as a traditional artist, and I think most importantly without the anxiety. So there's nothing easier than using Control-Z or simply letting that stroke lie and painting into it, for minor corrections. Many of you know that I enjoy painting landscapes because they are challenging. They help you to master many of the fundamentals of painting, such as form and value and color. So without these basic fundamentals, clouds tend to look very flat and will lack three-dimensionality. So we have to be able to bring that into our portraits, into our still lifes, and into our landscape paintings. This is often how photographs appear. So we can't necessarily use photographs because they don't totally give us the whole picture. They'll tend to look very flat. So we have to use them, but use them for visuals, but not necessarily to create that 3D atmosphere that we're after. If we observe really carefully how light falls on different planes, such as clouds and trees, for example, we start to see shapes instead of features, and that's very, very important to keep in mind. It's hard to do, it takes practice, but once you start looking at a tree more as a form, or as a bench as a form, or anything in a landscape as a form, it makes it easier for you to grasp it and to paint it eventually. This is an example. It's just a Seattle landscape from a reference image that I took when I was visiting Seattle, and it's walking along one of the shorelines there. And I like to spend time to develop value scales when I'm getting ready to develop a new painting. And one of the things that I do, and I want to show you just real quickly, this is a very simple thing, but there is a little template that I use here. It's a value scale from 1 to 10. And what you'll want to do is create a new file, approximately 200 by 900 or so. And in your gradients panel, and let me just go ahead and do this real quick so I can explain it. In your gradients libraries, there is a gradient called Warm Gray Range. And what you'll want to do is go ahead and fill this layer with the gradient. So I'm just going to choose Edit, Fill, and we're going to choose Gradient and select OK. And you can see from that point that it goes from dark to light. Now, if you wanted to switch this, of course, you could change it from light to dark on the top. Via the gradients controls here. You can do that easily. However, with that said, the next thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to Effects and then go to Tonal Control and choose Woodcut. Actually, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to choose Woodcut under Effects and Tonal Control, Surface Control. Now what you'll want to do is remove the output black and leave it to output color, and then coming down to your color edge here, make sure that that's set all the way to 0, and the number of colors that we want to choose here are 10. So we're going to continue to bring that up until we reach 10 colors. And I like to work with a 10 scale value from lightest light to darkest dark. And you can see that we've created that here. And then I'm going to simply select OK. And you can see from that point I just create a real quick little value scale that I can use. Now if I'm going to be, as a good example over here, if I'm going to be working with some warm tones and blue tones, cool tones and warm tones, I may create something with blues or with earthen tones or neutrals or greens, whatever it happens to be. But I usually start off in a landscape with my blues established and my warm tones established, my landmass established. That way I have my color set to use freely when I want to go in and alter any of those colors, or my color wheel if I need to be more exacting. Now, what are we going to do with this now? Well, a couple of things. If I wanted to change the values here, I'm going to go up to Effects and Tonal Control, Adjust Colors. And if I wanted to get something, for example, more on the blue scale, I'm going to start working with my hue shift and bringing it to the point where I find that particular color range that I'm looking for, and then work with the value and the saturation of those colors. And if I find something that I feel is going to work in the painting, and I like the fact that these have a little bit of that violet tone to it, I'm just going to select OK. Then I'm going to come over to my color set libraries, open the flyout, and choose New Color Set from Image. And I'm going to give it a name, and we'll just call it Blue Values. And I'm going to make sure that my max colors are set also here to 10, because I want to incorporate the same number of colors on the new color set here. Now if I wanted to add further colors, all I have to do is increase that. But right now we're keeping it simple and selecting OK. And if I come down to the bottom, you can see now that I've got those beautiful blue tones. And I can continue using this template, by the way, over and over again, just by changing those values. If I need a grayscale, a simple grayscale, which I have here, I just can desaturate it and make a nice quick grayscale value as well. So just wanted to share that with you, and I think for those of you that like having those grayscales, it's a really nice way of having a quick little value scale that you can refer to. So I'm going to open up an image here, and it's called Lazy River, and we'll go ahead and get rid of that. And the idea is that this image basically started as an opaque, meaning that I used very thick oils and acrylics, but the final version ended up as a watercolor. And I will show you how I achieved that in the next step. But in this case, I wanted to add a few colors that are in the dried grasses around the riverbed and mingle those colors into the trees. When painting trees, sometimes the greens of the trees can overpower the rest of the landscape. So it's important that you tone those greens down. Now we know that we can add, mix a little black with our greens, or mix a little gray with our greens, or a little white with our greens, and tone color down as well. But there's also another way, by incorporating colors or mingling colors into those greens, such as burnt umber, burnt sienna, yellow ochre, or quinacridone gold. And they all tend to tone the green when mingled throughout the foliage, but they also work to add color harmony and continuity to your painting. So I'm first going to go ahead and drop this, and let's get that dropped, and we're going to go ahead and add a new layer here, and I want to incorporate some additional texture as well. So let's first of all take a look at the paper library here, and I have that on my custom palette because it's one of the panels that I use quite often. And I'm going to come down to a custom paper called Cracked Leather. And I'm going to select it. And then I'm going to take a look at the panel here and determine just about how much texture I want to incorporate into these trees by adding a little bit of these surrounding colors up into the trees. Now the effect that we're going to use here is initially in the grain controls of the brush. So when I pick up the square chalk brush and I'm looking at the grain setting, I can see that it's set to 12%. Grain lets you control the amount of paper texture that brush stroke is going to basically reveal. So you can set the level of grain that you want to reveal via the grain slider or in the advanced brush controls. And we're just going to go ahead and bring that up here. So we've got that up. And we can take a look at the grain panel right here. And do any changes to our grain setting right from here as well. I'm going to again add a new layer and I'm going to take a look at sampling some of these colors that I see around this area. So I'm going to pick up maybe this darker value here, and on that new layer, and I'll just go ahead and close that for the time being. Love working on layers when you're feeling a little bit anxious about what might happen if you're just working on the canvas layer. how wonderful it is to be able to open a new layer, and if it completely messes up and you just are going in the wrong direction with the painting, gives you that chance to have that second chance and go back. Whereas you don't necessarily get that on a $20 piece of traditional watercolor paper. So with the grain setting at 12%, I'm going to just start going into the tree and just focusing on just a couple of little areas here. Bring my brush size up a little bit and just adding just little touches of chalk to this watercolor. And you can see now that what starts happening is you start getting a little more of that continuity going on. You get a little bit more of that color, that reflective color that comes up in those trees. And that green, if any areas that you feel have just gotten out of control, just by simply adding a little bit of that neutral earthy colors that you find down in this landmass, it just really will tone. Let's pick up a little bit a lighter value and also pull a little bit of that up towards the top. And I'll zoom a bit here so you can see how that texture is just lightly being kissed here and there. That might be a little overdue there. And then finally, to finish up on that, I'm going to go to this custom panel here, and I want to pick up a brush called, if I can locate it here, my canvas fill brush. This is a watercolor brush. I'm going to go ahead now and drop that layer. As I begin painting, I'm going to use quite a large brush here, and I'm also going to go back to my paper libraries and just choose my basic paper here. And I'm going to pick up this neutral value here and just float a little bit of it up into the sky. And that would be just about all I'd want. Just, again, to bring some of that additional color that you see in the landmass up into the sky. So these, again, are some of the ways that you can start with watercolor, you can start with acrylic, and simply begin bringing in different media. If you love working with texture, adding texture to your paintings, this is just a wonderful way of incorporating some extra textures, some extra interest into your paintings. Okay, so let's go ahead and close this one. Yes.
I just wanted to let you know you're doing such a great job explaining. Nobody is asking questions.
Okay. That's good or bad, I don't know.
That's you're doing a great job. But we did there's one from Sandy, and she was wondering if you would mind sharing your workspace.
Sharing my workspace. Actually, I do have a workspace. Don't we? I do have a workspace up at
Up on our.
Where did you post those at Corel?
You know what? I'll follow up. I'll send the link to everybody to let them know where the workspace.
But I think what Sandy's referring to is this particular workspace. And Sandy, yeah, I can actually do that for you too. Go ahead and email me if you're interested about this particular workspace that I'm using here. Or if there's brushes that you see me using that you'd love, I have no problem sharing them, color sets, on and on. So no problem there.
That's very generous. Thank you.
No problem. Okay, so let's talk about this technique of taking a opaque again into and creating more of that watercolor look. And then from that point on, I want to show you a quick way of just creating your own little cloud brushes as we go forward. One of the first things that you want to always consider when you're starting a painting is that tinting of the canvas, because that really is so important in developing or creating the atmosphere that you want to achieve, whether you're painting from a photo reference or from one of my favorite ways, just using your imagination. So you can imagine that a lighter tone is going to suggest, you know, a bright sunny day, while a darker tone, perhaps, you know, a storm on the way. So first of all, what I've done here is I've added a new layer, and I really wanted to have a little bit of paper texture coming through. And what I've done here is added a new layer, and then I'm going to open my paper or my patterns for you, which I have quite an extensive pattern library here, and I've chosen let's see, I chose the Saunders Waterford Knot, and this one is just a very traditional watercolor paper. I fill this layer with the texture. Now, this isn't a paper texture, this is a pattern, so keep that in mind. It's a different, you know, completely different application. So I've just filled that with a pattern, and then I've changed that composite method to multiply, and then reduce the opacity on that layer to the point where, I'll zoom in here, to the point where I feel it's realistic. It looks like the real thing, and that's what I was after. I don't know if any of you have painted with traditional media such as acrylics or worked with pastels or even chalks on watercolor, but it's a beautiful look. It has a beautiful effect, and you can get some very nice textural appeal working that way. So oftentimes I'll incorporate some of those traditional approaches in my work, and many times it works beautifully. Other times not so good. So you know, you just have to continue to practice and experiment, and gosh, there's just so many wonderful things that and so many creative venues that you can go you know, working this way. So with this, in this finished painting, you know, I've taken it about as far as I want to go in this step. On the canvas, I'm going to come over to the layers palette and down to an option called Lift Canvas to Watercolor Layer. And I'm going to select that, and I'm going to then drag that layer directly below that texture, so it's still there. And I'll close my patterns at this point, but I am going to come back to my papers, and we're going to again pick up a watercolor paper, and this time I'm going to use one called the KBWC5, and again, this is a Saunders type watercolor paper, very hard press or soft press paper, lots of texture, and it's exactly what I'm looking for to create the look I'm after in this painting. So the next option is that I need to select a brush that's going to enable me to create, you know, to get that look that I'm after, that very watercolor appearance. Now, there are two brushes that I will tend to use when I'm working this way. One of them is in the basic watercolor brush category, and it's called the Runny Wash Camel. And it's important that it is not a real watercolor category, that it's in the watercolor category only. And as you know, in Painter X3 there is a category called Real Watercolor and the Standard Watercolor category that's been around for some time. The other brush that I like to use is the again, that canvas fill watercolor. So between the two of those, I tend to, you know, depending upon how much run I want going on, I'll choose one or the other. Now I'm going to go up to the layers palette panel again and select Wet Entire Watercolor Layer. And what starts to happen here is you're going to start to see that paint begin to diffuse. So we start losing that look of opaque, and we start getting more into that real look of transparent paint or watercolor. And I tell you, you can really have a lot of fun with this effect. You can do it over and over again to the point where it becomes very, very translucent, very, very light. And you can almost use it to create an actual underpainting from, to develop an additional watercolor right on top of. But I'm only going to let this run out for a little bit here. I may let it run even a little bit further normally, but I'm going to go ahead and go back up to the, if Painter behaves here, let me get my, go back up to the layers panel here, and now I'm going to simply dry that watercolor layer. And again, because it's on a watercolor layer, well, it gives you that opportunity to begin playing with it, incorporating some additional ideas or value changes into it using watercolor, or you can convert it to a default layer or simply drop it to the canvas layer. And I'm going to do that at this point because now I have, again, that opportunity to start working into it with additional media. Now I'm going to add a new layer directly above the canvas, and I'm going to pick one of my favorite little brushes here. Do I have it on here? Yes, Digital Square Pull Blender. And I'm going to set the composite method to multiply. And when I set it to multiply, what happens here is we start getting, you know, the brush starts working with the underlying color. And what we can do is to use it to enhance some of the values. And let me zoom in just a wee bit here. Say, for example, if I wanted to go into some of these trees and work on some of the values in here, bring these down, it starts to incorporate some of that look of watercolor. Can add a few more little tree branches coming out here, tree stumps. I can work on changing up some of these values by just simply going over some of these green areas and darkening some of those values. Maybe taking a look at my horizon back here. Yeah, it's a little dark. And I'm going back over that brush stroke with very light strokes, and it actually blends a bit. So we've established a little bit of a shoreline back there, and just continue to work on some of these little values that you want to bring out, little details. Now I also could do something further. If I had left it on the watercolor layer, I could use you know, use it to lift some whites out, which is also something that's very traditional that we do in traditional watercolor painting. Here on the canvas layer, I could certainly do that by just, you know, picking up the eraser and maybe bringing the opacity down a bit and maybe just using it to pull out, you know, a few whites here and there. I think I need a little more opacity up.
Karen?
Yeah.
It's Helen Yancey, and she has a question. She was wondering, she noticed that a layer changed from multiply to gel, and she was wondering if that was on purpose.
Yes. Actually, in reality, with this particular brush, the digital square pool blender, I had forgotten. It is a gel-based brush, so if it changes from gel to multiply, it is gel-based originally, so I really didn't need to change it to multiply. So yes, Helen, good catch. The brush is set to gel composite method by default, so there's really no reason to change it. I think I had done that just out of habit.
She says, thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks, Helen. Okay, so there, you know, I mean, we typically go from a very opaque painting to creating something that, you know, is a little more on the watercolor side. You know, I may even take, you know, the freedom to, let me go to, trying to think of one that would be nice to use here. Just to maybe let's actually use dry splatter here, and you know, there's nothing more traditional looking than throwing in, you know, a little bit of splatter here and there. It's a little bit, you just see what we end up with. Let's go back to default. My brush is starting to lag a bit, Tanya. So I think the GoToWebinar latency is catching up with me. But you know, what I may do is throw a little texture, you know, a little extra watercolor elements into this. I'm even thinking that some of these brushes that I have, such as I've got some really fun dabs here that are always fun to play with. Maybe pick up a blue and just dab some of that in here and there, just to add a little bit of extra interest, you know, something like that. Change it, bring the opacity down, you know, if you need be, if it's over the top, that type of thing. Okay, so let's go ahead and close this one right now, and what I want to do really quickly, do I have time, Tanya? You tell me.
Of course you do.
Okay, so let's just go really quick to just a simple sketch here, and hopefully I can get this all in for you. This just again begins as you know, a very simple sketch. I'm going to change the composite method on the sketch layer to multiply, and by that what happens is that it will give it that transparency. So when I start actually bringing in those brush strokes on the canvas layer, I'll still be able to see my sketch below that. And at some point, I actually many times will end up deleting the sketch and not even using the sketch for the rest of the painting. So again, atmosphere. You know, we've got to create that initial background tinting that's going to give us that roadmap that we can get started with. Whether it's a stormy day or a beautiful blue sky day. Let's go ahead and pick a color here, and I think I'm just going to go with this nice number 8 here, and I'm just going to go ahead and fill it, and we'll just fill Command F or Control F, and we'll fill the canvas layer. Let me refresh that with just a nice beautiful blue, and we can go ahead at that point and begin. Now, some of these brushes here that I'm going to be using will be on the in that custom set that I prepared for you. So if I do use one here that you particularly like, ask and I'll make sure that it's on there. But for the most part, most of these will be, except for things like Schmidt and the Sargent brush WMC. Most of you have, but if you'd like me to include that one, I can certainly do that. So when we start building the sky mass here, I have a nice value scale that I can start working with, and I'll tend to I'll tend to start working with those lighter values first. And this particular brush, let's go ahead and bring up the advanced brush controls so we can have the well setting available for us to look at here. The lower that I bring this resaturation down and the higher that I bring that bleed setting up, the more that brush is actually, going to blend. So at first, I want a very concentrated color. So I'm just going to simply start building that brush and building those cloud forms up. Now at the horizon, at the horizon line, oftentimes what happens is these clouds will be much smaller and appear to be further back, and that's basically what we want to be able to show in the landscape. We want to be able to show that effect. So I'm going to start off with a basic color here and just kind of build this up a little bit. And then towards the top, I'm going to actually go into more of a gray tone up here and maybe just initiate a little bit of those stormy clouds coming in up towards the top. I hope you can't hear my my Wacom, believe it or not, is starting to squeak. I think I have used it so much that it sounds like there's a mouse squeaking in the background.
I thought you had a bird, Karen.
Yes, isn't that funny? In fact, I think I'm going to put a piece of paper over the top of it. And I do this quite often. Actually, if you just put an 8.5 by 11 over the top of your tablet will last a lot longer. And I just have a lot better feel for the brush a lot of times when I'm working on top of paper.
What kind of tablet? Which version?
It's the Intuos 5 Pro, yeah. I did have a Cintiq for a while. I just found it just a little clumsy to work with, just a little bit hard to deal with, but I know that there's lots of people that love their Cintiq, so I'm not saying it isn't. I just do fine with the Intuos. It does what I need it to do. Okay.
And you can travel with it.
Yes. Okay, so I won't go on too much with this, but one of the attributes that you really want to have in a cloud brush, definitely, is that softness, because you don't, when you're working more with this look of kind of pastels and chalk, you know, you want to be able to have those very soft edges, because, you know, when you look at a cloud, although if you're looking at it outside in, you know, in plein air, based upon the light of day and the type of contrast that you're looking at that cloud under, those edges sometimes can appear very sharp, but indeed, you know, they really aren't. Clouds don't really have sharp edges. They are very soft edges. So you have to be able to, you know, use the tools that Painter provides, such as diffuse blur and you know, the grainy water is a wonderful brush to use for creating clouds. Let me actually switch to that one real quick here, because if we look at the dab preview, we can see that in reality it is a very soft edge around it. So if you wanted to use the grainy water brush to actually start developing a cloud brush or creating your own cloud brush, it's one of the best, because it has a resaturation setting. You can work with it by increasing the resaturation, and guess what? You've got a brush that actually adds color. You can work with the jitter settings, you can work with the bleed settings and the expression settings with this brush. Also the spacing. So if I took the spacing down on this brush, you know, look at, I get more of a solid line now. So it actually is a great brush to begin developing a cloud brush from. So let me sample a color here and just say we want to use it to, you know, create the top of a thunderhead or something like that. You know, let's go ahead and work a little. Let's bring the stroke jitter up a little bit. You know, maybe we want a little bit of jitter to that brush. This is just a great, easy way of doing it. But now, once you've established that, you know, that shape of, you know, the thunderhead, let's take that resaturation back down to 0 and work on those edges just very softly with expression set to pressure. You know, we definitely can go into that cloud and start working on some of the edges and softening those edges up. If you like the look of that, then, you know, move on to maybe diffuse blur, which is another great brush, and soften those edges even further. So in combination, you know, with different media, you can, you know, you know, your opportunity for, you know, creating wonderful brushes is you know, just at your fingertips. I mean, it just everything's there for you. Just learn how to use it well, and it'll take you into hours and hours of brush creation and creating beautiful brushes to work with. You know, oftentimes with clouds also there's that negative space that we need to work on as well. So by sampling, you know, color around the solid shape of the clouds and then digging into it to create additional shapes. Let's bring our dry out down a little bit on that brush and go into the sky a bit. So, you know, I can go on and on working with skies. They never bore me. They're always different. They're always fascinating to develop because, you know, just like flowers, they're never the same any day, any given day. So for me, they're a beautiful subject. They're a wonderful subject to paint. I can't really do this justice in just a few minutes here, but I hope you kind of get the idea of how you can mix up media in Painter digitally, how you can, as a traditional artist, jump into Painter and experience something that's so lifelike, so real, that you'll probably never want to go back to traditional work, at least may not leave it completely, but but you'll definitely enjoy moving into the digital world as well.
Well, I have to say you are most definitely doing this justice in a couple minutes. I cannot believe what you can create in such a short amount of time.
Yeah, there's a couple of little brushes here. This one is called Wisps, and again, you know, using it just to create maybe more of those cirrus type brush strokes. Again, I would probably pick up grainy water in default and, you know, go back over those and soften those edges a bit. You know, something like this. Anytime that you can, when you're, for example, painting a landscape where trees are present, and you can show a cloud passing behind an element, a vertical, such as a tree that will tend to be those darkest values in your painting. That is going to set up that look of perspective, giving you that depth that's so important in landscape paintings. There's one here called the pinch cloud. Now, don't overuse it, but it's one of those brushes that you can use just to define little areas that you might want to create. You know, sometimes in clouds you've got these little wispy tendrils that might come out here and there. This is a good one for that, and just playing with. There's one here called Diffuse Pool, and again, it's just going into those different pockets of the clouds and maybe enhancing areas such as this, you know, pulling out little shapes.
Well, everybody is super excited about using some of these brushes that you're offering. They're saying it's amazing. Can't wait to get their hands on stuff. You're a wonderful teacher, which I knew before we even started. And I thank you so much.
Well, thank you all too very much for being here, and thank you, Tanya. Again, thank you so much for joining me, and I'll get those brushes up on the site for you as quick as I can, so you can all start painting, and I'd love to see some of your examples of your cloud paintings as well. And thank you again. I appreciate it.